In the dead of night in Los Angeles, Louis sneaks into a train yard cutting through a chain-link fence. However, his work is interrupted when he spots an approaching light. Acting fast, he stashes his tools and waits as a security guard confronts him, demanding identification. Feigning cooperation, Louis moves in closer, only to suddenly attack, knocking the guard unconscious and stealing his watch before making his escape. Later, he arrives at a scrapyard trying to sell the stolen fence. He haggles persistently with the foreman, attempting to push for a better price. Once the deal is settled, Louis seizes the moment to ask if they're hiring. He launches into a long-winded, corporate-style pitch about his skills, but the foreman rejects him outright. Undeterred, Louis even offers to work for free just to gain experience, yet the foreman remains firm, making it clear he won't employ a thief, evidently aware of where the fence came from. Driving through the city, Louis notices several police cars speeding past and decides to pull over to see what's happening. A major accident has left a car engulfed in flames, with people trapped inside. As he observes the chaotic scene, he spots a man named Joe and his assistant arriving with a camera to capture the dramatic footage. Louis watches closely, fascinated by their work. Once they wrap up, he approaches Joe to ask about the job. Joe explains that he's a stringer, someone who chases down crime scenes and accidents to film them, later selling the footage to the highest-bidding news station. The only requirements for the job? A camera and a police scanner. Intrigued, Louis asks if Joe is hiring, but Joe shuts him down immediately. The following morning, Louis catches the accident footage on TV, further fueling his determination to enter the field. To gather the necessary equipment, he heads to the beach, waits for the right moment, and steals a bicycle. He then takes it to a pawn shop, attempting to negotiate for the best deal. When the shop owner refuses to budge on the price, Louis opts for store credit instead, securing himself a camcorder and a police scanner. That night, he starts tuning in to local police radio frequencies, but quickly realizes he doesn't understand the codes or how to reach the scenes efficiently. His first attempt lands him at a routine arrest, where the officers promptly dismiss him. Later, he tries recording a DUI stop, only to be shooed away once more. Eventually, he stumbles upon the aftermath of a deadly carjacking. Determined to get compelling footage, he pushes in close to film the victim's body. His actions immediately draw the ire of an officer, who kicks him out of the scene. Another stringer, frustrated by Louis ruining his own shot, lashes out at him as well, but Louis ignores him. Instead, he eavesdrops as the man makes a call, carefully noting how he negotiates pricing with the news stations. Armed with this new knowledge, Louis heads to Channel 6, eager to sell his footage. When he presents his work to news director Nina, she's immediately impressed by how up-close and intense his shots are. She calls over producer Frank, but he balks at the graphic nature of the video, insisting they can't air something so disturbing on a morning broadcast. Nina, however, is undeterred. She simply suggests adding a warning label, asserting her authority as the boss. In the end, she agrees to purchase Louis' footage, marking the start of his venture into the world of crime journalism. Louis attempts to negotiate a better deal, but in the end, he doesn't get as much money as he had hoped. However, Nina reassures him that he has great potential and suggests that upgrading his camera would significantly improve the quality of his footage. Encouraged by her interest in buying more from him in the future, Louis asks what types of stories perform best. Nina explains that their audience is most drawn to graphic accidents and violent crimes, particularly in affluent white neighborhoods. The next morning, Louis watches his footage air on television, feeling a sense of accomplishment. Determined to improve, he downloads the news clip onto his computer and starts memorizing police codes to sharpen his skills. Later, he meets with a young man named Rick for an interview. Using a lot of corporate jargon, Louis makes the conversation sound more professional than it actually is, prompting Rick to talk about himself. Despite the unconventional approach, Louis hires him for his knowledge of the area, GPS skills, and, most importantly, because he owns a phone. However, when Louis reveals that the position is unpaid, Rick pushes back, explaining that he's nearly homeless and needs some form of compensation. After some back and forth, Louis reluctantly agrees to pay him $30 per night. That evening, the two sit in the car, listening to the police scanner, waiting for an incident worth covering. While they wait, Louis takes the opportunity to teach Rick the police codes. Hours pass with nothing noteworthy until they finally hear a call about a fire. As soon as it comes through, Louis speeds off, urging Rick to navigate the fastest route. But under pressure, Rick fumbles and gives incorrect directions. By the time they arrive, paramedics have already moved the victim away, making it too late to capture anything useful. Joe, another stringer, mocks Lewis for being late, frustrating him further. Furious, Louis blames Rick, insisting he needs better communication. Rick, in turn, pleads with Lewis not to rush him. The next time they get a promising lead, Louis keeps his temper in check and they manage to reach the location quickly. However, the crime scene, a recently robbed house, is already secured by police, leaving them with nothing interesting to film. Refusing to leave empty-handed, Louis watches for an opening and sneaks inside while the officers are distracted. Inside, he finds bullet holes in the kitchen and deliberately rearranges the family photos on the fridge to make the scene appear more tragic. He then captures footage of the bullet-riddled window, framing the victim speaking with the police outside. Before leaving, he discreetly takes some junk mail to obtain the victims' names. Later, Louis presents the footage to Nina, who is thrilled with its intensity. Frank, however, is alarmed, pointing out that Louis clearly trespassed and stole personal information. But Nina, unfazed by the ethical concerns, decides to run the story anyway. From that moment on, Louis and Rick grow more adept at chasing breaking news, consistently capturing compelling footage to sell to Nina, pushing deeper into the gritty world of crime journalism. Rick expertly maps out the fastest routes for Louis, ensuring he reaches crime scenes ahead of the competition. Meanwhile, Lewis films every gritty detail without hesitation, carefully avoiding the authorities. Later, he watches the news, eager to see his work broadcast, and meticulously archives all the clips on his computer. As his earnings grow, he invests in better equipment, upgrading his own camera and buying a second one for Rick to capture alternate angles. One night, they arrive at a car crash before the police. Louis approaches one of the shaken drivers, attempting to get a statement, but the man, frantic on the phone with 911, angrily tells him off. Undeterred, Louis moves toward the wreckage and spots the other driver, lifeless in a shadowy area. Without hesitation, he drags the body into the car's headlights for a clearer shot. He films everything he can until the police arrive and force him to leave. As Louis walks away, rival stringer Joe watches him, frustrated at having missed this one. Later, Louis delivers the footage to Nina at the station. She notices a smear of blood on his sleeve, but barely has time to question it before Louis changes the subject, inviting her to dinner. Initially, she refuses, citing professionalism, but Louis subtly reminds her that without his exclusive content, the station would struggle. Realizing she has little choice, she reluctantly agrees. The next day, Joe corners Lewis, revealing his plans to expand with multiple news vans and offering him a place on his team. When Louis refuses, Joe persists, until Louis makes it clear he won't hesitate to get violent. Furious, Joe storms off, cursing Louis under his breath. On Saturday, Louis takes Nina to dinner, where he bluntly declares his desire for a more personal relationship. Nina dismisses the idea, insisting the dinner is strictly business, but Louis quickly lays out cold, hard facts. Her station's ratings were at rock bottom before his footage drew in thousands of new viewers. With her contract set to expire soon, he implies that if she wants job security, she should reconsider. Trapped by his leverage, Nina gives in, agreeing to meet him on weekends in exchange for exclusive video rights. Sometime later, Rick makes a wrong turn, and they miss the biggest news event of the night. Joe and his crew capture the footage first, rubbing it in Lewis's face. Frustrated, Louis still brings Nina a collection of lesser crime clips, but she snaps. Her rivals now have the top story, and her bosses won't be happy. Feeling used, she lashes out, furious that she gave herself to him for nothing. The next morning, Louis watches Joe's footage air on the rival network. Rage boils inside him, and in a fit of fury, he smashes his bathroom mirror. Determined to get back at Joe, he hatches a plan, sneaking into his house that night to sabotage his van. Later, Louis and Rick arrive just in time to record another crash. It turns out that the van belongs to Joe, and he's gravely injured from the accident. As paramedics load him into the ambulance, Rick insists that filming a fellow stringer is crossing the line. Joe is one of them, but Louis is unfazed. He steps in even closer, his camera rolling, capturing every agonizing detail. Joe, barely clinging to life, glares at Louis with a mix of fury and helplessness as blood chokes his throat. A few nights later, Louis and Rick arrive at a crime scene ahead of the police. A grand mansion has been broken into, and as Louis moves in stealthily, he spots the criminals fleeing. Instead of backing away, he ducks into the bushes and records everything. Clear shots of their faces and the license plate on their van. Once they're gone, he ventures inside, his camera scanning the crime scene. A trail of blood leads him through the house, and he meticulously films every detail, ensuring that nothing is missed. He even lingers on an empty crib, crafting suspense that suggests the worst. When he reaches the final room, he discovers one last victim, still breathing. But instead of offering help, Louis continues filming, capturing the man's last moments before slipping away with Rick, just as sirens blare in the distance. A few blocks away, Louis pulls over and swiftly edits the footage, removing any evidence of the criminals or the surviving victim. Later, he presents the video to Nina. She's stunned by the exclusive footage, while Frank, as expected, is horrified. Legal concerns arise, prompting Nina to consult the station's lawyer, who reassures them that as long as they censor the victims' faces and withhold the location, they're in murky but manageable waters. Confident in his leverage, Louis demands $15,000 for the footage. When Nina hesitates, he finally drops his polite facade, asserting control. She will pay whatever price he names, ensure his company, Video Production News, gets full credit, and introduce him to everyone at the station. Intimidated, Nina concedes. As the news segment airs, Louis watches with satisfaction as the anchors follow Nina's cues, amplifying the drama and fear factor in their coverage. During a commercial break, Nina's bosses call, eager to meet Louis, impressed by his work. The next morning, Detective Frontieri and her partner show up at Louis' apartment. They question him about the crime scene, but Louis sticks to his carefully crafted story. He claims he arrived after hearing gunshots, intending to help, but found it was already too late. He mentions seeing a van speeding away, but says he couldn't identify the perpetrators. The detectives remain skeptical, but with no solid evidence against him, they have no choice but to leave. Determined to push further, Louis runs the van's plates and tracks down one of the criminals' addresses. He and Rick park nearby, waiting for movement. When the van finally appears, Rick assumes Louis will call the cops immediately. But Louis has other plans. He wants the criminals to move to a more public location, where their inevitable confrontation with law enforcement will make for an even bigger story. Rick, unnerved by the escalating danger, demands a raise. Without hesitation, Louis agrees to pay him $75 a night. It's only after the deal is sealed that Rick realizes he could have asked for much more. But when he tries to renegotiate, Louis shuts him down. Once the criminals leave their house and pick up a second accomplice, Louis and Rick tail them to a fast food restaurant. That's when Louis finally calls the police, giving a full description and emphasizing that these are the suspects from the high-profile crime. He even provides his own name, ensuring he'll be credited for the tip. Rick quickly catches on. Louis is after the reward money. He demands half, which infuriates Louis, but needing an extra camera angle, he reluctantly agrees. As Rick positions himself across the street, officers arrive. The moment they approach, the criminals open fire, igniting a chaotic shootout. Several people are killed, including one of the suspects, while the other manages to escape in the van. The police give chase, and Louis wastes no time. He picks up Rick and speeds after them, barking orders to keep filming. The pursuit spirals into chaos, leading to a multi-vehicle collision that knocks out one police car. The suspect, refusing to surrender, slams his van into the remaining officers, triggering a catastrophic crash. Louis seizes the moment, jumping out of his car to capture the wreckage. Declaring the suspect dead, he beckons Rick closer, urging him to learn how to frame the perfect shot. But as Rick approaches, the supposedly lifeless criminal suddenly stirs, gun still in hand. Before Rick can react, a single shot rings out and he drops to the ground. Louis remains unfazed and keeps recording as the criminal emerges from the car. Just as it seems he might attack Louis, the sound of approaching police sirens makes him reconsider. He turns to flee, but the officers waste no time and gun him down on the spot. Without hesitation, Louis shifts his attention to Rick, capturing every detail of his injuries on camera. It's at that moment Rick realizes the truth. Louis had known all along that the criminal was still alive and had deliberately put him in harm's way to create a more dramatic story. As Rick takes his last breaths, Louis remains indifferent, taking his camera before moving on. Later, Louis delivers the footage to Nina, who who is thrilled by its graphic intensity. Just as they prepare to air the story, Frank brings up a crucial piece of information from a confidential source. The crime wasn't just a random act of violence. The murdered family had ties to organized crime and had been hiding illegal substances. However, Nina dismisses the revelation, insisting that portraying them as ordinary victims will make the story more compelling. When Frank points out that she's starting to sound like Louis, she takes it as a compliment, crediting him for pushing them to new heights. Detective Frontieri soon arrives at the station, demanding the footage as evidence. Nina, however, refuses to hand it over without a warrant. Frustrated, Frontieri takes Louis in for questioning. She pushes him, calling out his ruthless and unethical work practices, but Louis remains composed, sticking to his version of events. With no concrete evidence against him, she has no choice but to let him go. A few nights later, Louis expands his operation. He now has 2 vans bearing the Video Production News logo and has hired 3 interns. Though they won't be paid, he assures them he'll never ask them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. With that, they set off into the night, ready to chase the next big story. Okay guys, if enjoyed this breakdown, stick around. More thrilling content is just around the corner. Subscribe now. Love you all. Bye.